Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Eve Clark, and I'll be presenting on my final project proposal, Panopticism and Capitalist Critique in the Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. To begin, I'll be introducing the text, although I'm pretty sure that most of you will be familiar with it already. The Hunger Games is a dystopian novel that follows 16-year-old Katniss Everdeen as she volunteers for a televised match to the death in place of her sister Prim. Prior to the beginning of the games, her fellow tribute, Peeta Mellark, confesses that he is in love with her in a live interview. Although she is initially outraged, believing that this makes her look weak, she agrees to go along with it due to the belief that this will obtain her sponsors and increase her odds of surviving. While in the arena, she pretends to have romantic feelings for Peeta. The creators of the game, as a result, announce a rule change that would allow two tributes from the same district to win as a pair. However, when Katniss and Peeta are the only two tributes left, this rule change is retracted. Rather than allow one of them to die, Katniss proposes a double suicide, reasoning that they have to have a victor, and that two is better than none. Her plan works, and both are allowed to live, although the book ends with the insinuation that the Capitol will remember her disobedience. I also think it's important that you understand the context of how the games began. 74 years prior to the events of the Hunger Games, there were 13 districts and one capital, with each district providing a different service or good for the capital. The districts rose up in rebellion, and as punishment, the capital wiped out the 13th district and established the Hunger Games to remind them what happens when they rebel. All 12 districts are subject to intense scrutiny and surveillance from the capital. Although there are varying wealth levels amongst districts, they are all subject to the reaping into the games. This leads me to my research problem. To what extent does the Hunger Games critique aspects of modern American society, such as the wealth divide and modern capitalism? What alternatives does it offer, if any? And I'd also be considering how Bentham's Panopticon functions in the Hunger Games as a method of state control. While these don't seem related initially, I see them as intertwined, as the Panopticon upholds the economic system. My theoretical concepts. First, let's talk about the Panopticon. The Panopticon is a prism designed by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham, and the idea is later extended by Michel Foucault. The Panopticon consists of a ring of prison cells built around a guard tower. This enables the guard to always be observing the prisoners. In Foucault's writing, he discusses backlighting the guard tower to ensure that the prisoners cannot tell when the guard is watching them and when the guard is not. Therefore, the prisoners modify their behavior under the assumption that they are always being watched, or that they always could be. There are several panoptic structures within the Hunger Games, as discussed in Perhaps I Am Watching You Now, Panem's Panopticons by Kelly Wesner. The first being the district system itself. As you can see on the map on the right of the screen, the capital is situated in what is now the modern-day Rockies, elevated to the position of the guard tower above the surrounding districts. The districts are prevented from having any contact with each other, much like the prisoners in the Panopticon. They're forbidden to leave and can only go to the capital for things such as the games. If they can't communicate with each other, they can't start an uprising. Within the districts, the people are subjected to the surveillance of cameras and of peacekeepers trained and sent by the capital. In District 12, Katniss is one of the only people who realizes that this is not total surveillance, that the electric fence surrounding the district is not always on, the cameras are not always working, and the peacekeepers aren't always watching. She takes advantage of this to hunt and provide for her family in ways that she is not allowed to. The arenas are the most obvious example of the Panopticon within the Hunger Games. The arenas themselves are panoptic structures, enclosed, controlled spaces observed both by the game makers, who mete out dramatic punishments, and the people of Panem, who must watch mandatory broadcasts. Implanted tracking devices allow the game makers to locate tributes anywhere in the arena. The tracking devices and/or cameras must also monitor the health of the tributes, as the game makers seem to know exactly when to fire the cannon and send a hovercraft to collect dead tributes. The Panopticon functions to uphold the wealth gap. While the Hunger Games is not a capitalist society, it has been described as neo-feudalism. That's not to say that it can't critique a capitalist society. In fact, I would argue that it offers multiple critiques of our modern society. So the wealth divide very much mirrors that of today. Consider the two images on the right of the screen, the top being people from the capital and the bottom being the people who live in the most impoverished part of District 12, including Katniss. The rich are made out to be almost grotesque. Their position in society is not earned. They're born into it and is maintained by the labor of the people in the districts. Inequality is maintained in several ways that we can see at work in the Hunger Games and today. Class conflict. Rather than correctly direct their anger at their oppressors in the capital, the people in the districts often resent each other or the other wealthier districts. This is achieved by the use of tesserae, extra food rations for the poor they can only obtain through entering their name for the games extra times. As a result, people within District 12 are not angry at the capital, they are angry at the wealthier people in their district who do not have to apply for tesserae, even though they are still subject to the reaping and to oppression from the capital. The wealth gap is also maintained through education. The children in District 12, as well as the other districts, are taught to accept the Panopticon early. Katniss recalls in several instances how she was compelled to watch the games in school and how her sister must also be doing the same thing. Not only that, but the capital provides televisions to everyone in the districts which turn on compulsorily, forcing everyone to watch. The children are not given tools for class mobility. In District 12, most education the children receive is to prepare them to mine coal. They are not given any other options. The way to advance in the society is to play in the Hunger Games and win. But if you don't win, you die. This is in some ways an almost grotesque and amplified form of the American dream. My paper approach and sources. So the sources that I have considered most heavily so far have been Perhaps I Am Watching You Now, Panem's Panopticons by Kelly Wisner, and Classes in Session, Power and Privilege in Panem. I have been considering the elements of capitalist critique in the Hunger Games largely using the Panopticon. That being said, I would be remiss to ignore the scholars who believe that the Hunger Games is a critique of Marxism. That is why my research question is, to what extent does the Hunger Games criticize modern capitalism? In order to give both sides consideration, I will also be considering the following texts. The Odds Are Never in Your Favor, Preventing Economic Growth in the Hunger Games by J. Brian O'Rourke. This paper considers the Hunger Games as a Marxist critique. And Precarious Dystopias, The Hunger Games, In Time, and Never Let Me Go, which consider the economics of the Hunger Games from multiple perspectives. What I am finding so far is that the Hunger Games is surprisingly ambiguous. Suzanne Collins has many critiques of modern society that she has talked about herself, and yet she does not seem to have any answers so far, which I think is fair, because who does? Thank you so much for paying attention. Here are my works cited, and I look forward to seeing everyone else's presentations.